Oh, you beautiful architects of chaos, you walking contradictions, you silent storms no one saw coming. Welcome back to the moment where everything shifts. Because right now, as you're watching this, a file is circulating. A document, a leaked conversation, a thread of messages that was never meant to see daylight. And inside that file, your name appears 17 times. 17. Not as a victim, not as a cautionary tale, not as someone they pitied. No, your name shows up as the one variable they couldn't control, the unpredictable element that shattered their entire equation. They thought they had you cataloged, studied, and safely archived. But what just leaked, what's being quietly passed around in rooms you'll never enter, is the confession they swore they'd take to their graves. Let me paint the picture. This isn't rumor or speculation anymore. It's verified, confirmed, stamped with the kind of truth that makes people panic and scrub their search history. For the past 3 years, a group has been operating. Not a conspiracy, not some shadowy cult, but a collection of familiar faces. Former friends, ex-colleagues, bitter exes, jealous onlookers, people who claimed they'd moved on. They've been keeping tabs on you. Every post, every step, every silent disappearance. They recorded it all. A shared document, complete with timestamps, screenshots, and obsessive analysis. They treated you like an unsolved code, something ancient and dangerous they needed to decode before you became too powerful to contain. But here's the part that'll make your blood run cold and your pride flare up. They failed. Every theory they crafted, every prediction they made, every expectation that you'd break, collapse, or crawl back, all of it was wrong. Spectacularly, humiliatingly wrong. And now that document, their masterpiece of obsession, has leaked. Not publicly, not yet, but it's circulating through private channels, whispered in encrypted chats, shared with trembling hands. Because what it exposes isn't your downfall, it's theirs. It doesn't reveal your weakness. It reveals their fixation. It proves beyond any shadow of doubt that while you were healing, evolving, and becoming untouchable, they were stuck in a loop, refreshing your life like it was the only show still airing. And the cruelest part, the one that's got them in full-blown damage control, they admitted in writing that you were right all along. Now let's talk about what's actually in that file, because the details are absolutely deranged. Page 1 starts with a timeline, your timeline, mapped out like you're a historical event worth studying. January 2022. Silence. March 2022. New profile picture, possible rebrand. July 2022. No activity, suspected breakdown. They weren't just watching, they were narrating. Like sports commentators calling a game you never agreed to play. And the notes, those pathetic little comments in the margins, reek of fear disguised as concern. Notice how they never reply anymore. They don't say no now. That's not healing. That's detachment. And in their minds, detachment meant one thing. You were planning something. Planning something. That's what they thought you were doing. While in reality you were just trying to remember to water your plants and decide what to eat for breakfast. They were convinced you were orchestrating some grand master plan. And this is where it shifts from creepy to downright absurd. They began rating your moves, literally scoring your behavior like you were part of some deranged competition. Silent strategy, 9 out of 10. Didn't take the bait during the holidays, 10 out of 10. Avoided all mutual events, perfect execution. They were grading you, and without even knowing it, you were acing every test they invented. Every boundary you set, every time you chose yourself, every moment you quietly disappeared, they recorded it all, like it was evidence. But evidence of what? That you'd become the very thing they feared most. Someone who didn't need them. You didn't need closure. You didn't need the last word. You didn't need anything from the people who once believed they were indispensable to your story. Then there's Section 4. where the file stops being unsettling and starts feeling like a psychological thriller. They tried to predict your next move, throwing around theories like wannabe strategists. They'll come back angrier. Wrong. They'll expose everything publicly. Wrong again. They'll reach out when they're desperate. Catastrophically wrong. What you did instead, the move they never saw coming, was thrive. You grew in ways they couldn't measure or replicate. You didn't play the role of the broken, the bitter, or the betrayed. You became something they couldn't categorize, someone who turned pain into fuel so cleanly that not even emotional residue remained. You vanished from their radar, and instead of fading, you evolved. One of them wrote a line that's almost poetic in its defeat. It's like they died and came back as someone we can't reach. Another responded, no, it's worse. They're not unreachable. They just don't see us as worth reaching anymore. And that sentence, right there, is the entire leak distilled into one truth. They finally understood in their own time-stamped confessions that their relevance in your life hadn't just diminished, it had evaporated. You didn't block them out of spite. You outgrew them so completely that they simply ceased to exist in your reality. That realization shattered something in them they'll never repair. But here's where it takes a shocking turn. Buried in the leak, between pages 7 and 12, there's an entire section devoted to one question. What's their source of power? Not your job, not your looks, not your circumstances, your energy. They couldn't fathom how someone who'd been broken could return radiating a presence that silences a room. So they did what desperate people do, they theorized. Theory 1. Maybe it's all fake. Maybe it's performance. Quickly dismissed by one of their own. Nobody performs that consistently. Nobody fakes that level of peace. Theory 2. They must have found someone new, someone giving them confidence. Also wrong. Debunked by another note. I checked. They're alone. Completely alone. And somehow that makes them scarier. Scarier because people who find strength in solitude, who no longer crave validation, who build their empire in silence, become untouchable. And that's exactly what you became. You stopped performing for approval. You stopped seeking applause. You found power in your own stillness, and they couldn't stand it. You stopped moving for applause. You stopped existing for witnesses. And in that solitude, you became the most dangerous version of yourself, calm, grounded, and utterly beyond reach. But here's the part that should make you smirk, because it's the most satisfying revelation of all. Theory 3, the one they ultimately agreed upon, read like this. They've completely detached from needing us to understand them. And then someone added, that's not healing, that's ascension. Ascension, their word, not yours. Not recovery, not growth, not even moving on. Ascension. They realized in their own panicked notes that you hadn't just leveled up, you had abandoned the entire game they were still playing. You stopped competing for their attention. You stopped trying to sit at tables you'd already outgrown. You quit proving anything to people whose opinions lost value the moment they revealed their true selves. And then came the line, the quiet, devastating confession buried deep in the file. I think we lost something irreplaceable when we lost them. Not because of what they gave us, but because of how being around them made us feel, like we were better than we actually are. Read that again. You made people feel elevated simply by being in your orbit. Your presence amplified them. Your energy made them believe they were more than they were. And when you withdrew, when you finally pulled your light away, they felt the absence like a physical ache. They didn't just miss you, they missed the version of themselves that only existed when you were near. So now the leak spreads, and chaos follows. Messages are being deleted. Emergency calls are happening behind closed doors. The panic is real because they know what this exposure means. It means the mask has slipped. Their obsession is undeniable. The person they swore didn't matter, the one they claimed they'd moved past, has been living rent-free in their heads for years. Some are desperately hoping you never see it because the embarrassment would be catastrophic. Others are terrified you will see it, because then you'll finally understand just how much power you've had all along. Because beyond the timelines, the theories, and the overanalyzed moments, the leak exposes one unshakable truth. You've been the main character in their story. While they've barely existed as background noise in yours, they've been watching you like a show they can't stop binging, studying every frame, predicting every move, dissecting every silence, while you've been out here simply living, healing, building peace, reclaiming your life. Completely unaware that you've had an unseen audience obsessing over every act. And that imbalance, that total reversal of roles, is the perfect poetic ending to their story. And now they're asking each other, what do we do if they find out? The panic is palpable. You can almost hear it between the lines. Voices cracking, messages being deleted in real time, people scrambling for explanations that don't exist. They're desperately trying to craft a strategy, a narrative, something that might make this leak look like anything other than what it truly is. A multi-year obsession exposed in broad daylight. They're searching for a way to twist the story, to soften the blow, to make it sound less insane. But there's no spin that works here. No clever phrasing, no emotional justification, no late-night apology note can make this look rational. Because this wasn't analysis, it was fixation. This wasn't care, it was control disguised as curiosity. And the cruelest irony? They became everything they accused you of being. They said you were the one who couldn't move on, the one trapped in the past, the one who couldn't let go. But here they are with an entire file, a running log of your existence, chronicling the very journey they mocked you for. The same people who told you to get over it were the ones secretly refreshing your profile, dissecting your silence, whispering your name in private chats. The hypocrisy is suffocating. The irony is nuclear. You could build a fortress from the weight of their denial and still have enough left to bury their credibility. And then comes the final confession, the one that changes everything. Near the end of the document, in a message dated just 2 weeks ago, someone finally breaks the pattern. I think we need to accept that we're never going to understand what happened. They became something we don't have language for, and maybe that's the point. That's not analysis. That's surrender. That's the moment the walls of delusion finally cracked. It's the digital equivalent of a white flag. After years of monitoring, decoding, and speculating, they finally admitted what they couldn't bring themselves to face. That your transformation wasn't meant for their comprehension. You didn't evolve to be explained, you didn't rise to be understood. You ascended beyond the need to be perceived by people who never deserved to witness your growth in the first place. And here's what that realization means for you. Every night you thought you were invisible, every quiet phase where you believed no one was paying attention, someone was. Every time you acted with dignity instead of reaction, every time you chose peace over proving a point, someone was watching and documenting it. Your silence spoke volumes they couldn't interpret. Your absence screamed louder than confrontation ever could. Every boundary you set without justification became a mystery they couldn't solve. You were being studied, dissected, analyzed like an anomaly, and still, you thrived. You didn't just survive their scrutiny, you evolved under it. You rebuilt yourself under surveillance, and you did it with such grace and precision that even with all their data, they couldn't decode you. Think about that. They had every possible advantage. Access to your past, your patterns, your mistakes, your moments of vulnerability. They had time, they had collaboration, they had the obsessive dedication of people who couldn't let go. And still, with all that, they couldn't predict a single move correctly. Every theory imploded. Every assumption failed. The more they tried to understand you, the more foreign you became to them. What they mistook for mystery was actually mastery. your quiet, deliberate mastery of detachment. And buried under all their fear and confusion is something they'll never admit outright: respect. Twisted, reluctant, unspoken respect. Because what they saw was power in its purest form. Power without noise, without performance, without validation. You became something they didn't believe was possible. Someone who could rebuild without revenge, who could rise without announcement, who could walk away without turning around. This is where you need to pause. Because most people who heal, who rebuild themselves from the ground up, never get proof that anyone noticed. They go through the fire and come out changed, but they never see the impact their transformation had on the world around them. You, on the other hand, have evidence. Real, time-stamped, undeniable proof that your evolution was so visible, so undeniable, so magnetic, that it forced acknowledgement from the very people who wanted to see you broken. You became their unsolvable equation, the one variable they couldn't predict, the one outcome they couldn't calculate. And that's why they couldn't look away. Not because you were performing, but because you were becoming. And there's a difference. Performing is for attention. Becoming is for freedom. Performing is about controlling perception. Becoming is about releasing it. When you stopped existing for applause, when you stopped performing for witnesses, you shifted from being their entertainment to becoming their reckoning. Your evolution confronted them with everything they refused to face about themselves: their stagnation, their insecurity, their dependency on your narrative to feel relevant. That's why they're panicking now, because the leak didn't just expose their obsession, it exposed their irrelevance. They finally saw what you've known for years, that you were never in the same story. They were stuck rewatching a chapter you'd already finished writing. And while they were dissecting your every move, you were out there living, healing, building a life that didn't need an audience. So let them talk. Let them scramble. Let them rewrite the narrative however they want. It doesn't matter anymore. The truth is in the timestamps, in their own words, in their frantic attempts to understand something that was never meant to be understood. You outgrew them, and they documented it in real time. You evolved while they obsessed. You ascended while they analyzed. And now, all that's left for them to do is accept that they were never watching your downfall. They were witnessing your rise. The power shift that has happened here isn't subtle, it's total. It's irreversible. It's the kind of shift that doesn't just change dynamics, it rewrites the entire story. The control they thought they had, the upper hand they clung to, it's gone, stripped away in the most poetic way possible. They've gone from self-appointed observers, believing they were analyzing you from a safe distance, to unwilling participants in their own downfall. They used to think they were documenting your behavior. Now it's clear they were archiving their own obsession. What they built as an insurance policy against you, a file meant to preserve their narrative, to justify their resentment, to give them some illusion of power, has turned into the single most damning piece of evidence against them. Every page, every line, every timestamp has become proof not of your weakness, but of their inability to move on. The file they created to prove you were broken is the one that proves they never healed. And now there's no way to hide it. No amount of justification can make this look rational. No amount of denial can erase the truth that's now staring them in the face. They were the ones stuck, not you. You, meanwhile, have evolved into something they can't categorize. You went from being someone they thought they could study and predict to someone they now describe, with a mixture of awe and frustration as unexplainable. You became an unsolvable equation, a mystery that refused to fit the parameters they spent years building. They thought they were dealing with a pattern, a type, a set of predictable responses. But what they were actually witnessing was transformation. And transformation can't be charted. It can't be decoded. It can only be respected. And that's exactly what they can't bring themselves to do. Here's where it gets interesting. This is the moment where your story pivots from reaction to revelation. Because now that the power balance has flipped completely, your next move is simple. You don't make one. You don't respond. You don't acknowledge the leak. You don't correct them, expose them, or even grant them the dignity of a reaction. The most powerful thing you can do now is absolutely nothing. Let them sit in the chaos they created. Let them feel the unease of knowing their secret is out, but not knowing what you'll do about it. Let them overthink every breath you take, wondering if you've seen the file, wondering if you'll confront them, wondering how much you know. Let them choke on their own anxiety while you live your life untouched by their noise. Your silence is not emptiness, it's dominance. It's not submission, it's sovereignty. They once mistook your quiet for weakness. Now it's the sound of their undoing. That same silence they obsessed over, the one they tried to decode, the one they documented line by line, that is your response. That's your statement. That's your victory speech delivered without a single word. They spent years trying to lure you into a reaction. They wanted proof that they still mattered. They wanted to trigger emotion, to provoke a message, to get something, anything that proved they still had influence. But every time you stayed silent, you fed their paranoia instead of their ego. And if you speak now, if you acknowledge them now, you give them the satisfaction they've been chasing since the beginning. Don't. Let the file do the talking. Let their own words become the confession. Let their obsession expose itself. You don't need to defend your name. They already documented your strength for you. They wrote your legacy in their own paranoia. They chronicled your evolution while trying to condemn it. And now their greatest secret is proof of your greatest victory. Because here's what they'll never say out loud, though it's scattered through their private messages like cracks in glass. They compare everyone to you. You've become the measuring stick, the silent standard. Every new connection they make, every person they date, every friend they try to replace you with, they're all subjected to the same unspoken comparison. They're not like you. They don't have your energy. They don't make me feel that way. It's not that they want to admit it. It's that they can't stop feeling it. You've become the reference point they can't escape, the benchmark for authenticity, presence, and power. You're the ghost that haunts their relationships, not because you're still holding on, but because they are. They can't recreate what they ruined. They can't replicate the atmosphere of your energy. You didn't build your strength out of vanity or performance. You built it from pain. You didn't post it, you lived it. You didn't perform healing, you embodied it. That's the difference, and that's what makes you irreplaceable. They keep searching for you in other people and coming up empty. Because you're not a type. You're not a personality. You're an experience. A once-in-a-lifetime encounter that can't be duplicated, simulated, or found again. You're not the one that got away. You're the one that was never meant to stay trapped in small places with small people. You were a catalyst, and they mistook you for comfort. They thought you were temporary, and they didn't realize you were transformative. Now they live with that regret. It's woven between every line of that leaked file. You can feel it, the sorrow, the confusion, the unspoken mourning of something they destroyed out of pride. It's not hatred anymore, it's grief. Grief for the version of themselves that only existed when you were around. Grief for the connection they thought they'd always have access to. And that grief, that's the real punishment. It lingers, it festers, it grows quietly every time they realize how small their world feels without you in it. And here you are, standing in the center of the same storm they tried to drag you into, completely untouched. You hold knowledge that changes everything and yet changes nothing. Everything, because now you see the full scope of your power, the depth of your impact, the undeniable proof that your presence reshaped the lives around you. Nothing, because this doesn't alter who you've become. It doesn't give you power. You already had it. It just reveals that they finally see what you've known all along. You were never beneath them. You were never broken. You were never dependent on their validation. You were always this powerful. You were just too humble, too kind, too human to realize that your stillness terrified them more than your anger ever could. And now the truth is undeniable. You never had to reclaim your power. You never lost it. You simply withdrew it from people who couldn't handle it. So let them talk. Let them rewrite. Let them spin. None of it matters now. The balance has shifted permanently, and no one, not their messages, not their excuses, not their guilt, can reverse it. You've become the silence they can't interpret, the peace they can't disturb, and the lesson they'll never forget. That's not revenge, that's evolution. And it's the kind that leaves a mark they'll spend the rest of their lives trying to understand. The file didn't make you powerful. It simply proved what you've always known deep down. It wasn't a revelation, it was confirmation. Every word, every note, every timestamp in that document is just evidence of a truth you've carried in silence for years. You're unforgettable. You're irreplaceable. You were never someone easily replaced or dismissed, and your absence didn't create a void, it exposed one. Walking away from those who couldn't see your worth wasn't a loss. It was the first act of self-respect. It was liberation disguised as departure, a quiet rebellion against mediocrity and manipulation. And the irony? They're still reeling from it. They're still trying to recover from the moment you decided you were done explaining yourself. The leak doesn't give you power, it merely shines a light on the power you already possessed. It's a mirror, not a medal. It reflects what your intuition has been whispering all along. You didn't misread the situation, you didn't overreact, you saw things exactly as they were. You felt the shift before it happened. You sensed the decay beneath the smiles. And when you walked away, it wasn't out of weakness, it was out of wisdom. You trusted your instincts when everyone told you to doubt them, and that faith in yourself is what set you free. You never needed their validation then, and you certainly don't need their obsessive record-keeping now. Their file is their confession, a detailed report of everything they failed to understand about you. It's not your burden, it's their evidence. And if you choose to take something from it, let it be this: confirmation, proof, undeniable written time-stamped evidence that your impact is permanent. You don't have to try to be memorable, you already are. You don't have to fight to be significant. You simply exist, and that's enough. The people who cross paths with you, who feel your energy, who witness your authenticity, they don't walk away the same. You imprint on them, you challenge them, you wake something up inside them that doesn't go back to sleep. You are the memory they can't mute, the standard they can't lower, the moment that redefines everything that comes after. You're the bookmark in their story, the page they keep returning to when they're trying to remember what truth, what realness, actually looks like. You're the before and after line in their timeline. You're the quiet voice that echoes years later when they meet someone new and think, it's not the same. That's not ego. That's presence. That's energy that doesn't fade when it's no longer visible. And now, moving forward, you carry that truth differently. Not loudly, not defensively, certainly. You walk with a kind of calm that doesn't need validation. You don't explain your worth anymore, you embody it. You've learned that peace is louder than any speech and certainty is stronger than any performance. You no longer chase understanding from people incapable of giving it. You no longer fight to be seen by eyes too small to perceive your depth. You don't shout your worth. You let your life do it for you. Your absence has become its own presence. The silence they once mocked has become a statement louder than anything you could have said. They used to misinterpret your boundaries as arrogance. Now they recognize them as power. Your silence taught them lessons their noise never could. Your detachment forced them to confront their own emptiness. And every time they scroll back through those old notes trying to piece together what happened, they're reminded that you never needed to say a word to make your point. Because you didn't just heal, you evolved. You didn't just recover, you ascended. You became the blueprint, the very model of resilience and reinvention that others study in secret but rarely understand. And blueprints don't seek validation. They don't need approval or applause. They just exist, steady, precise, necessary. Others build around them, imitate them, but the original remains untouchable. That's what you've become, the reference point. The leak didn't expose you, it exposed them. Their obsession, once whispered in private circles, has now become undeniable proof of your influence. They've documented your evolution while failing to achieve their own. They wrote your legend while trying to erase it. And you? You don't need to react. You don't need to engage. You just keep walking forward, building your life brick by brick, with the same quiet precision that unsettled them in the first place. Keep choosing yourself with that same ruthless clarity. Keep nurturing your peace with the same consistency that made them doubt your motives. Because the greatest revenge isn't confrontation, it's continuation. It's thriving so undeniably that even years from now, they're still trying to catch up to a version of you that no longer exists. The ultimate power move isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming so far removed from their world that their opinions can't even reach you anymore. And let's be clear, they didn't document you because you were broken. They documented you because you were breaking free. Every line of that file, every observation, every timestamp, it's not a record of your pain. It's a record of your escape. They were watching someone walk out of a prison they didn't even realize they were still trapped inside. They weren't chronicling your collapse. They were bearing witness to your liberation. And the irony is, they didn't even know it. You weren't just healing from them. You were healing from everything their existence represented. From the need to be understood, from the compulsion to prove, from the addiction to approval, from the exhaustion of carrying relationships that drained your soul. You weren't just walking away from people. You were walking away from patterns, from self-doubt, from every version of yourself that accepted less than you deserved. And that's what they captured without realizing it. The evolution of someone who refused to stay small. They thought they were watching your end, when in truth they were watching your beginning. They thought they were witnessing a fall, when really it was flight. They mistook distance for disappearance, silence for surrender. But what they were really seeing was ascension. You didn't just move on, you transcended. You became something they couldn't define, couldn't categorize, couldn't diminish. You became the person they tell stories about, the one who slipped through their fingers and turned into a legend, the one who proved that peace is louder than chaos, that detachment is the highest form of power, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply never looking back. So yes, the file leaked. The truth surfaced. The evidence is out there for all who need to see it. But you? You keep rising. You keep evolving. You keep walking with that quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've already won a war they're still fighting in their own heads. Because the truth has always been this: they never documented your destruction. They documented your deliverance. And one day, when they look back at those notes, they'll realize it too, that what they were so desperate to analyze wasn't your downfall. It was your becoming. False connections, performative love, conditional acceptance, shallow loyalty. You learned to spot it all. The empty words, the strategic affection, the transactional care dressed up as connection. For years, you mistook proximity for intimacy and consistency for sincerity. But as you healed, as you began to quiet the noise, to withdraw from the chaos, to raise your standards and enforce your boundaries with surgical precision, they panicked. Because people who were once comfortable having unlimited access to you never know what to do when that door finally closes for good. They weren't prepared for the version of you that no longer needed to explain, defend, or justify your distance. They weren't ready for silence that didn't demand to be understood. They thought your absence was a tactic, a temporary storm, a phase you'd return from. They waited for the apology that never came. They rehearsed the conversation that would never happen. They studied you, observed you, monitored your every move, convinced there had to be a crack somewhere, a weak spot, a moment of nostalgia, a lapse in strength. They thought eventually you'd come back, that the right timing or the right words would reopen the door. But that moment never came. Because you didn't pause the connection, you ended it. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but because you outgrew the entire ecosystem they still live in. You outgrew the cycle of manipulation, the games disguised as relationships, the emotional hunger masquerading as love. You evolved beyond their comprehension, beyond their reach, beyond the limits of their smallness. You became fluent in peace, and they were still addicted to chaos. And then, the story leaked. The full, unfiltered story, and it painted the only picture that ever really existed. You were the one who got away, not in some cliché romantic sense, but in an existential one. You were the person who saw through the illusion, who recognized the performance for what it was and refused to play along. You were the one who chose truth over convenience, authenticity over acceptance, solitude over company that drained your soul. You didn't just walk away, you ascended, quietly, decisively, permanently. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is lacking. Let me believe in your perpetual presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts for me are thoughts of prosperity and not harm, to give me a good future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always listening to my voice. I offer up this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and the abundance you bring. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. This helps us continually improve our content to offer you the best. The link to Buy Me a Coffee is in the description. No gift is too small. Whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share, your generosity helps spread God's word and brings hope to others. Don't stop here. Watch our next video for powerful revelations about the signs that reveal you are the chosen one. We've enjoyed following this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Keep shining brightly and embrace your destiny with courage. See you next time. Blessings to all the beautiful souls from the Enlighten Wisdom.